podcast is sponsored by TGO Magazine.
Hello and welcome to the second TGO Show, the audio version of the UK's best-loved hiking and backpacking magazine, brought to you by the Outdoors Channel. My name's Bob Cartwright, and before I go any further, can I thank all of you who have been in touch regarding the first TGO Show podcast. Everyone at TGO Magazine has been delighted and encouraged by your enthusiastic response and promise in the months to come to take on board all of your comments and ideas. Well, almost all of them. And some more good news. As well as the monthly TGO shows, look out for some TGO podcast specials. In the next few weeks, we'll be climbing Mount Ararat in search of Noah's Ark and interviewing an incredible character who has been described as the most prolific peak bagger in the world. Watch this space. So, what's on this month's TGO show? Well, John Manning and Chris Townsend report from the Outdoors Trade Show at Freidrichscafen with news of some sensational ultralight developments. Alpine expert Kev Reynolds fills in some of the background to the art of guidebook writing. Mountaineer Alan Hinkes talks about life after the world's 8,000-metre peaks. And Judy Armstrong talks about gear from a female perspective. But first, what do you do once you've climbed all 14 of the world's 8,000-metre peaks? What comes next? The Munros? The 7 summits? Or do you just settle back and relax for a while? Well, Cameron McNeish caught up with Alan Hinkes, who about a year ago climbed Kanchenjunga to complete his round of the world's highest mountains. Cameron asked him what he's been up to since.
I just can't believe how quick the time's passed. I've been doing loads of things, said yes to too many things, been doing loads of charity stuff, doing a lot for Water Aid, Cystic Fibrosis, Duke of Edinburgh's Award, Outward Bound, and I've just been trying to get into the hills a lot. I've been up in Scotland in the winter, the lakes in winter. I nipped over to Kashmir, believe it or not, ski mountaineer in India, on the border with India and Pakistan, and I'm trying to spend a bit of time with my little grandson as well, enjoying myself with him. So I just don't know what's happened to the time. It's amazing how it's flown through.
So is there life after the 8,000-metre peaks?
There definitely is, yeah. I mean, I just love being in the hills, the British hills. I really do. You know, Scotland in winter is one of the best places to be. I love it. And I'm not missing the Himalaya at the moment. It's funny, although I do sometimes get these sort of funny feelings when I hear certain sounds and things and think, ooh, that's a bit Himalayan-ish sort of thing. So I will be going back to the Himalayas. I will do a big mountain again, for sure. But I just love being in the British Hills. People can't understand that. They always say they must pale into insignificance after the Himalaya, and they don't. I really do think the British Hills are where it's at. They're fantastic.
What's the next thing on the development of Alan Hinkes?
Well, it's an interesting one, because I do feel, believe it or not, I do feel like I've done what I want to do in life. I'm happy. Doing the 14 8,000ers was something I set myself only about 10 years ago, really. When I'd got 8 of them done, I had 6 left. And now that I've done it, I really do feel satisfied. I feel free to do anything I want, and I do think that anything I do now is a bonus. I really do. And but there are loads of challenges to do. I've not been to the Antarctic, for example. I haven't been to Greenland yet. I'd like to get my rock standard back up to E3 and above if possible, and so there's lots of things I want to do, which you could say are all selfish things. Perhaps I should do more for these charities. So there's stacks of things to do. How am I going to have enough time to do it? I haven't been to New Zealand yet, for example, you know. I haven't done yet, and I know I've probably mentioned this to you before, but I haven't even done Stack Poly yet. So there's loads of things for me to do in Scotland. I haven't been to the Isle of Skye for several years. I haven't been out to Pabby, rock climbing and places like that. I've never been to the Shetlands. Honestly, there is just so much I want to do. There really is.
I suppose it's really doing these things and finding a way you can actually do these things and make a living from it.
Yeah, I'm lucky in that I've been working, with Berghaus. I really do feel fortunate there, but Berghaus is a great company. I know it sounds like I'm plugging them, but I've been with them virtually 20 years now, and it is a British company, not German, and fantastic product, so I'm happy with that. And I do public talks, which traditionally been known as lectures. I'm trying to do corporate talks more. I am a guide, so I take people out in the hills, write articles for various mags and sell photographs, so I am trying to make a living out of it, and I do, and that is fortunate. Often it ties you up, and people ask you to do things for nothing a lot of the time, which I do for charities quite a bit. So my time is taken up a lot, to be honest. I think it'd be probably easier if I was a highly paid teacher. And I know some teachers think they're not highly paid, but apparently, if I'd carried on teaching for the last 20 years, I'm sure I'd be a head or a deputy head. So apparently no one wants to be a head or an advisor and earning a reasonable salary and having the summers off. And I know I'm going to get shot down in flames for that, because they all work through the summer, don't they? But you know what I mean.
Yeah. The big question that people keep asking is, when are we going to see the book? The story of the 8,000 metre peaks.
Well, do you fancy writing it for me, Cameron?
I wasn't there, mate.
I should have done a book yonks ago. It is remiss of me, I must admit. And I will get it out, I hope, in the next 18 months. I really do, even less if possible. I'd like to do one on the 14 8,000ers first, which could be 14 chapters, or it could be 16 if there's an intro and a wrapping up, summary. But I think I might have to do a sort of a biography type thing. So hopefully, as I say, within the next year maximum, but it could be a little bit longer.
It could probably start off with a big feature for TGO magazine on the 8,000 metre peaks, and that'll give you something to sort of work from.
What, 14-page special? No, have you got enough room for a feature on the 14 8,000ers? Because it would have to be a big feature, wouldn't it? Yeah.
We'll do a special supplement.
Yeah, something like that, yeah. What, call that supplement a book, you mean? Yeah, no, I've really got to work on that. I mean, I've got scores of thousands of photographs, and if I work with someone that interviews me, it will bring out some of my anecdotes that I sometimes forget. So I've got to get that done. I'm sort of almost on the case of the book.
Alan Hinkes, and it sounds as though he's got plenty to keep him occupied in the months to come. One of TGO magazine's proud boasts is that it is the only outdoors magazine in the country to feature regular monthly features devoted specifically to gear for women. Judy Armstrong is TGO's woman's gear columnist, and Cameron McNeish asked her if there had been any obvious increase in the last 12 months of numbers of women going out onto the hills and mountains.
Yes, certainly, and it depends to a certain extent where you're looking. In New Zealand, for instance, where I was brought up, women have always been heavily involved in the outdoors, but in France, where I spend a lot of time, more women are definitely being seen higher up the mountain. And in Britain, absolutely, particularly in places like the Lake District, the honeypots, which are popular with tourism per se, but the walkers used to be hardcore at the top or bimbling along the bottom. Definitely seeing more women going further up.
You've been reporting on women's gear for TGO for about a year now. Have you seen much of a rise in the output of women's, women-only equipment from the UK outdoors market in that time?
Absolutely, and the quality and the quantity are improving dramatically. This year, season 06, compared with a year ago, there's probably, I would guess, 50% more available, and the quality is infinitely better, and the choices are much greater in terms of colours and in terms of shape, because different brands make women's product for different shapes. For example, if you look at the Scandinavian brands, they tend to be taller and thinner. The American brands tend to be bigger chested. The British brands tend to be sort of more of your classic feminine shape. So the brands seem to be becoming more aware of the market, but they're creating product for their nationality's market, which is where it gets really interesting when you get American brands coming to Britain and so forth.
So that must make it pretty difficult when you're actually testing the stuff. If you've got long, gangly Scandinavian stuff and big-chested American stuff, because you're probably about 5'2", 5'3", and quite a trim figure. It must make it very awkward.
It's really funny. I mean, particularly testing trousers. Jackets aren't quite such an issue, but with trousers it's hilarious because the Scandinavian women have got to be about 4 foot taller than me. So I try and make it clear when I'm writing it that while this product didn't necessarily fit me, it would fit a woman shaped, however, tall and thin and shaped like Claudia Schiffer. But I can still test the fabric, the design features and the performance attributes, even if it doesn't happen to fit me like a glove. If it does fit me like a glove, then I have great pleasure in saying so. But I accept that I'm not exactly the typical figure.
So what are the companies in the UK that are really flying the flag for the outdoor woman?
If you mean brands that are available in the UK as opposed to UK brands, which is a very different kettle of fish, I would say, well, this is where you come into the problem. Millet, for example, a French brand, has the most wonderful cut for women, the most wonderful designs and fabrics, but it's almost impossible to buy it within the UK retail sector. I would say Haglofs in the main, Swedish brand, are doing very well for women, very technical, but they are definitely aimed at the taller, slimmer fit. Disappointingly, the UK brands like Berghaus, for example, I've found to be slipping in terms of their shape. They're getting more oriented toward fashion. Alpine, another British-based brand, has fallen down the slippery slope very recently of hipster trousers, for example. This is my current bugbear. Why women who are carrying a rucksack would wear hipster trousers is completely beyond me. Sprayway, the same. So it appears to me that the British brands are actually starting to fall into the fashion as opposed to function trap, while the, what I would call offshore brands, particularly the American ones, are definitely focusing more on performance.
Why is this happening? Is it simply because there are much bigger sales potential in more fashionable gear?
I haven't the faintest idea. I'm continually having this discussion with the marketing people, and I think that what happens is you get a designer in a meeting with a marketeer who happens to be in a different meeting with the money man, and they say, well, let's try this because it looks good on the high street. But the outdoor woman doesn't shop on the high street. She shops in an outdoor store because she needs outdoor product, not fashion-oriented product.
Is there any aspect of equipment in this country that is still lagging behind?
I would say, looking at the product I've tested for TGO over the last year, 18 months, that the basic products, the jackets, the trousers, fleeces, rucksacks, boots of all sizes. I've just tested a big pile of what I call big winter boots for women who want to go seriously winter climbing. They're all right up there. You can find product that is as good for women as the best of the men can have. The only place we're falling down is pee funnels. Women need to pee too, and we don't want to get out of a tent in winter to do it.
Well, that's fair comment, and it's not so easy to pee in a bottle if you're a lady.
And I tried.
Okay. Now you're the only woman in this country writing specifically on women's gear. Do you have any message for the UK outdoors industry?
Pink is nice, but often it's nice to have colours beyond pink, although I have seen over this year, we've had 7 or 8 pinks in the ranges. It's nice to have a wide colour palette, and it would be nice if more of the gear that I test was more widely available at retail.
Judy Armstrong finishing on an interesting note. How often do we hear of people who read about gear in the magazines, want to buy it, but then can't find a retailer who sells it? A challenge there for the outdoors industry. I'm sure most folk who listen to this podcast will have shelves full of walking and climbing guides. In the September issue of TGO magazine, guidebook writer Andrew McCloy offers a lot of good advice to anyone considering writing a walking guide themselves. But a word of warning: the whole process isn't necessarily as easy as you might expect. One of the UK's most prolific guidebook writers is Kev Reynolds, who recently compiled a guide to an Alpine route he devised himself, the Tour of the Jungfrau region. Cameron McNeish asked him how long it took to put the route together.
It's difficult to say, really. It's something that grew on me over the years. I suppose when I actually sat down and decided to do it, it probably took me all of an hour.
I thought you were going to say something like 25 years.
No, well, of course, I've known the area for about 40 years. And it was really a case of, as the years went by, every time I was there, I would look at things, and there was, I was always doing sort of one route at a time, either, for a guidebook or leading groups around, but not seeing the whole as a sort of a unified place that I could put together. And so when I got home, I would think, gosh, if only I could have the time to fit this walk with that walk, that nice little hut with that little restaurant and things like that. What a fabulous tour we could make. And so the idea, it just grew over the years like Topsy, I suppose. And there you are. It just knitted together neatly.
So how familiar do you have to be to to put a guide together to a walk like that? I mean, you hear of people writing a guide often after just 1 or 2 visits.
Well, it can be done, of course, but sometimes one needs to have plenty of background knowledge so that you can save making mistakes. I mean, one of the things about a guidebook writer actually makes the mistakes that he hopes that those who follow his routes won't make. So if you've got years of experience of an area under your belt, you can think, well, I've made all the mistakes in the past. I know which bits aren't worth including and which bits are. Now, that's one aspect of it, one viewpoint. Another viewpoint is to go at an area almost completely new, so that you are seeing an area through totally fresh eyes, and hopefully you can convey that freshness to the reader of your guidebook, who will also come to it with a completely fresh eye, but with the experience that you have built up during the course of creating that guidebook.
You're a very prolific guidebook writer, and I've no doubt that you're a great enthusiast for the concept of guides. But isn't there a sense that they perhaps rob us of that essential sense of exploration that's so important to mountaineering?
Yes, absolutely. Until Walt Unsworth asked me to write my very first guide to the Pyrenees, I'd never even looked at a guidebook. I was totally disinterested. My idea of activity in mountains was to go into a mountain area armed with a map and look at a mountain or whatever, and then study it on the map and think, can I make a route up there, and attempt to do so. If I failed, fine, as long as I had a good day out, and so forth. I could not understand why anybody would want to follow anybody else's routes. When he invited me to write this guidebook to the Pyrenees, I underlined about it in my mind for a while, but I suppose there's a certain egotism about being asked to write a book. I've been writing lots of articles about the Pyrenees, which is why he turned to me for that. And then I had to go and look at existing guidebooks, not to the Pyrenees, because the only one was dated 1862, Charles Pack's, the only one in English. I had to look in other guidebooks to see what people wanted, and I dismissed some of the things that were in those other guidebooks, but I gained an idea of what was required and started working on them. Now, to this very day, my personal view of being in the mountains is one of personal exploration. Opening up yourself to new experiences. But there are thousands of people who love the mountains every bit as much as I do, but who feel that they want the experience of somebody else just to help take them by the hand, if you like, to take them out into that environment to interpret it for them.
Kev, tell us a little bit about why the tour of the Jungfrau region is so special.
Scenically, it's got to be one of the most impressive and the most dramatic regions in Europe. I believe that implicitly. That is the ultimate reason for going there, to gaze on that scenic magnificence. But then, on a journey such as our tour is, we actually move our way through it so that we absorb it, so that we see it changing, or rather our perspective of it changes almost every step of the way, so that we're getting different shadows of the views. We're getting a totally different perspective of the environment as we work our way through it. It is not a terribly challenging route, demanding. There are lots of ups and downs. Some of them are very steep, but very few of them are what we would call dangerous, apart from one or two, just a slight little bits of possibility of rockfall or whatever. The scenery does change dramatically from the very high alpine environment to the lush lower valleys with their meadows and their streams and waterfalls. And the places where we stay, they are so good. There are fancy hotels in Grindelwald and New and places like that. I've avoided them. I've avoided all villages apart from tiny Steckelberg at the head of the Lauterbrunnen Valley. And the intention is to stay in the out-of-the-way places so that we can gain the maximum experience. We can always be comfortable, warm, well-fed, gastronomically enriched at home. I say that I go to the mountains to go to other places for experience. Experience is the most important thing there. And if it's going to be uncomfortable or cold or whatever, so be it. It's part of the payment for that experience. Well, the places that we're staying at, they're not uncomfortable, they're not cold, and the food is damn good almost everywhere. And we're not paying much for it either. Everybody seems to think that, Switzerland is terribly expensive. But, we stay in the most incredible places and pay less for bed breakfast and evening meal than we would pay B&B here in the south of England.
Yeah. And how long will this trip take me?
If you're in a rush, you could do it in 7 or 8 days. I say take 10 and enjoy everything.
Kev, what's the next guidebook writing sortie? Where are you off to next?
Well, on Tuesday, I'm off to the Alps to do an update to my Chamonix and Zermatt Walker's Oat Route guide. And then I've got to go back and do the TMB, the Tour of Mont Blanc, to update my guide on that. And I'm also working on a big book on all of the Swiss Alps.
And you call this work?
It's a tough life, Cameron. I can't imagine what I'd do if I wasn't doing that. It's great. I'm a lucky man.
Looks like a good route for next summer, and you'll find more information on the tour of the Jungfrau region in September's TGO magazine. In the same issue, you'll also find details of this year's outdoor trade fair at Freidrichscafen in Germany, which features the inaugural Outdoor Industry Awards. Companies from throughout the world were invited to enter products for the competition's 8 categories, and they were judged by an international panel of 6 experts that included TGO's own Chris Townsend. Perhaps not surprisingly, lightweight products featured heavily, if you pardon the pun, in the results, with the Gold Award going to Haglof's Oz Pullover, a Gore-Tex Paclite waterproof smock. One of the Silver Award winners was the very popular Laser Competition tent, which is officially the lightest tent in the world. In this special report, John Manning spoke to Andy Utting of Terra Nova, manufacturers of the Laser range of lightweight tents, before congratulating Andy Williams of Haglof's, winner of the Gold Award. Finally, Chris Townsend gave John a roundup of what took his attention at the show, with an enthusiastic response to the new lightweight camping stoves that were on display.
Okay, Andy, another accolade for the tent. How does that feel?
Absolutely fabulous. I think we must have accumulated 4 or 5 awards now on the Superlight range for Terra Nova. It's excellent. But to get the tent, the weight that it is, so we've had to look at several factors. It's not just one factor in the tent that has made it that light, and I think it's the amount of effort overall that's gone into making the Guinness World Record holder for the lightest tent. Yeah.
Because there's been a lot of attention to detail in the fabric and the material you've used in the poles. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I can tell you some of the things. We obviously are a well-known company who's used to using tape seams in tents, for example, and we've had to redevelop fabrics. We've spent about 3 years developing this tent. We had around 1,000 fabric tests to get the fabrics right. We've worked with the pole manufacturers to get the poles right. We've looked at the zips and the availability of zips, etc. Every single element of that tent has been looked at for weight.
So, Andy, Haglofs has won the very first Gold European Gear Award. What does that mean to the company?
Oh, it's absolutely ecstatic, because it's recognised in many ways the technology and the ideas that all our lovers of outdoor gear have produced. So, we're all thrilled to bits.
So it's a good incentive for more innovation, more lightweight design for the future?
Well, I think many times, you sort of question to yourself, how much more can you develop? And when you consider, 20 years ago we were developing Gore-Tex jackets and wonderful stoves and fantastic tents, and here we are 20 years later and we're still innovating. The question is, where does it stop? We think we've taken it to quite a high level with this jacket, and you only have to feel it and see it and live in it to know that it works. But who knows?
For the benefit of the people listening to the podcast, could you describe the jacket?
We've got a great guy at Haglofs. In fact, we've got a great team. The guru for me on textiles is a guy called Frederick Lundberg. He really loves putting the right fabric in the right part of the body, and he's got a real feel for the technological aspects of the fabrics. And then we have a very good patterning team who make sure that the garments are going to do what we want them to do, because if the garment doesn't fit, then actually it's going to be uncomfortable to use. One of our ideas is to try and recreate the Emperor's clothes, you know, so in actual fact, if you don't know what you're using, then you can actually be out there enjoying what you're doing. And so the Oz pullover has been designed to fit in your pocket, fit in the pocket of your backpack, fit in the top pocket of your shirt, and yet if the weather's bad, you can put it on, you can keep doing what you're doing, you can stay dry, you don't overheat, you don't get too sweaty. I think most importantly with these ultralight garments is that ultralightness is one of the aims, but we've also got to have things that when people buy them, they actually feel that they're getting value for money. That means that they're going to last for a decent period of time. And so our Packlite Oz jacket has a polyamide face fabric, which is really, really soft to play with, and a hood design that may look rather bizarre when you look at it at first, but when you actually put it on, it just follows your head. Then the garment's going to become part of you, rather than you having to become part of the garment. What we're trying to do is to try and produce light products, but that have got durability and at the same time comfort.
What is the weight of it, and when will people be able to find it in the shops?
Well, if you're a man, it's 175 grams, and if you're a woman, it's 155 grams. So women certainly get a better deal on the Oz pullover than men do. Sadly, you can't get it this month, but when the right time to be going out on the hill in the spring, it'll be there for you in the shops.
Thank you very much, Andy, and again, congratulations on the Gold Award.
Thank you.
OK, Chris Townsend, we're 2 days at the Outdoor Show in Germany, the biggest trade fair in Europe. And here we are now, surrounded by people from all over the world, stuck at Stansted Airport for umpteen hours. Perhaps you could tell us what your overall impression of the gear was at the show, and in particular, what we can expect to see coming through in the new year.
Absolutely everything is at the show that you can imagine, but unsurprisingly, an awful lot of it is fashion gear. But of the stuff we're really interested in, there's an awful lot of developments in stoves at the moment. One of the most interesting is the lightest screw-in gas stove yet, which is going to be a new version of the Primus Micron, which is already my favourite stove. But this one, at something like 67 grams, is even lighter than alternatives, because they've taken off the piezo igniter, which is a relief because they always break, and they've made it out of titanium. Otherwise, it's the same efficient burner as before. Perhaps even more interesting is that the trend started by Jetboil for having heat exchangers and having a combined unit of pans and stoves has, perhaps unsurprisingly, been taken up by other people. And Primus have a new stove out in which they have combined the heat exchanger with the pan, and they're pushing the idea, which is a very good one that we've been running in TGO for years, that what matters is not the weight of the stove alone, but the weight of the stove plus the fuel. So if you have a more efficient unit that uses fuel more efficiently, you carry less fuel, the overall weight goes down. And certainly this stove of theirs looks nice. I hasten to say, of course, we've only looked at these things, we haven't used them yet. Well, let's hope they work as well as claims, but we don't know that.
We've also seen the curious idea, very innovative idea, of inverting the gas cylinder on a stove.
Well, this is the first time anyone has done this officially, so to speak. It's been done unofficially for years. I've done it unofficially and written about it, with a hose-connected stove that's got a preheat tube that runs through the flame, and the latter is essential. In cold weather, when the gas doesn't flow properly as a gas flow, you can turn the cartridge upside down to make it into a liquid fuel stove, and it will get liquid flowing through the tube, and this increases the efficiency. At the moment, the only way to do this is turn the cartridge upside down and prop it up with tent pegs, a boot or anything you've got handy and hope it doesn't fall over. And certainly in the past, stove manufacturers have actually said, oh, you can't do this, you know, the stove will flare, it's dangerous, and advised against it. Now, however, Coleman have produced a new stove called the Firestorm, which actually comes with a base unit on which you stand the cartridge upside down. So they're acknowledging it. This is also, for a hose-connected stove, it's very light, much lighter than most of those on the market, which is good, and it has a multi-fuel option, so you can also use it with white gas or paraffin if you want to. So this again sounds another very interesting stove that I'm looking forward to testing.
And we also saw the small plastic regulator on the hose rather than on the attached to the stove separately. This
was the Optimus Nova, which has been my favourite liquid fuel, multi-fuel stove for many years now, ever since I used it on the Arizona Trail. But they've now brought out a Nova Plus, which is more efficient, it's lighter weight, and on the original Nova there's a lever on the burner which you use to control the flame, which is awkward to get at through a windscreen and can get a bit hot because it is a very powerful stove. Well, now, instead of this, they have simply put a regulator near to the fuel bottle and you simply turn this. It's supposed to give finer flame control than the original one. It's lighter and simpler, it's less easy to break, and you're not going to burn your fingers using it. It's well outside any windscreen. So this looks like a good development and improvement on, again, an already superb stove.
And just to round up on those stoves, if you had to pick one to do your next 12 million mile walk, which do you think you'd go for? And I know you've not tested them yet, but go on, make a commitment that will allow you to retract at a later date.
If I could get the fuel and it was in mostly above freezing temperatures, the Micron, because although it doesn't come with a heat exchanger, the weight is so low that any other stove is going to have to be super efficient to beat the combination of the micro and a gas cartridge. But obviously that type of screw-in gas stove does not work very efficiently in below freezing temperatures, and you have to be able to buy the gas. I mean, if you've got to carry 10 cans with you, then it's a very heavy stove suddenly. If it was going to be somewhere remote and where it was going to be cold, I would probably, if it works as well as predicted, go for the Firestorm, because you've then got the option of using gas if it's available, and you've got the cold weather facility. And much as I like the Nova, the Firestorm is a lot lighter. But I stress that I would have to be convinced that it really does perform as claimed and is going to prove durable. But I must admit, looking at it as a trade show, it looks pretty good.
Off the top of your head, any more pieces of kit that really caught your eye this year?
Nothing else that immediately leaps to mind. We saw all sorts of interesting things. Clothing. Well, Paramo, for the first time, are doing insulated garments, which is new. They're lightweight, they're not ultralight, but they're the sort of garment you would carry in the winter to pull on top of your Paramo jacket when you stop or if it gets exceptionally cold. Synthetic insulation, windproof, showerproof. There's an over-the-head smock with a hood, and there's a vest, gilet, whatever you want to call it. But these both look excellent products, and I like the fact that they're specifically designed to go on top of everything else. So they're not things where you think, well, if I get this 2 sizes too big, I might be able to get it all over my outer garments. It's what they're designed for.
And this year we've seen at the Outdoor Awards, the Gear Awards, in which you were involved as a judge. Hopefully they'll inspire a lot more innovation over the next 12 months. What would you hope to see at the next year's show?
Well, I certainly think the stoves and heat exchanger idea has still got a long way to go in terms of development, so it's good to see other companies picking up on it. I mean, eventually it will be nice to see some way of combining the heat exchanger with an ultralight stove like the Micron, which would require, I think, a heat exchanger fitted to the bottom of a pan that would go with the stove. MSR have also got a stove with a heat exchanger that looks fairly good. I know less about this one, but I certainly think that's the direction for stoves to go. But for really the lighter stuff, it's not there yet. If you're cooking for 2, it probably is. That either the Jetboil or the new Jetboil, which is a bit bigger than the old one, or the Primus are probably a great choice for cooking for 2 or 3 people, but they're too big and heavy still, and the pans are too big.
And shelters?
Well, shelters, the benchmark now, of course, in terms of weight for a complete tent is set by Terra Nova, who did get an award for the laser competition. Whether at the moment, with the materials that exist, anyone can beat that without reducing the size, I would doubt at the moment that can be beaten. So I suspect what we'll see is larger designs becoming lighter. Tents for 2, tents for 3, GEA D6 design for severe mountain weather. I think it'd be nice to see some of these coming down in weight, which they're beginning to in some areas anyway. With other shelters, again, tarps can't really get lighter either. It would be nice to see a combination of a tarp and a bug shelter that really works well together and is easy to use in UK conditions.
It sounds like the ultralight boom is continuing, and that's got to be good news for all of us. Well, that's about it for this show. Thanks to all our contributors and to the Podsafe Music Network, who provided the music. Check them out at music.podshow.com. Keep a lookout for the TGO Show specials that I mentioned earlier, and indeed check out subscription details for TGO Magazine at www.tgomagazine.co.uk, the UK's most authoritative outdoors magazine, produced by enthusiasts for enthusiasts, and now with added podcasts. Until next time, this is Bob Cartwright and the Outdoors Channel wishing you happy hiking. And remember, according to Henry David Thoreau, the swiftest traveller is he that goes afoot. See you next time. Bye-bye now.
This podcast is produced and hosted by The Outdoors Channel. Find out how easy it is to subscribe to all our podcasts by visiting theoutdoorschannel.co.uk.